item going. Our first action item is going to be the approval of the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Des Moines, seconded by Pleasant Hill. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. The agenda is approved. Up next, we have a vote on the approval of the November meeting minutes.
Move.
Second.
Moved by Des Moines, seconded by Polk City. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, November meeting minutes are approved. Up next, we have our consent and vote. And this will, if anyone has any questions to any of the two items on there, we're happy to answer them. But we moved this over to consent a few meetings ago to speed things along. Any questions related to consent items? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion of approval. Second. Moved by Des Moines, second by Clyde. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Consent is approved. Thank you. Public comments. Dylan, do we have anyone signed up?
We do not.
Is there anyone present that wishes to speak if they haven't signed up? Hearing nobody, move on to the presentation and vote, the fiscal year 2024 audit.
And I do not see our auditor online yet, so
We'll circle back.
yeah, maybe we skip that one and come back to it.
All right, we'll circle back to 6. Next item would be item 7, presentation and vote on the comprehensive safety action plan draft and target goal. And I see Gunnar moving to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. As most of you know, we've been working on a comprehensive safety action plan under the Safe Streets and For All program from the USDOT with the goal of putting in for an application as a region here shortly from implementation dollars. Today, we have representatives from our consulting team, Tool Design, to talk through what you can expect to see in that draft plan, working fast and furious to try to have that back to you for approval in February so that we can hit an assumed target release date of the NOFO in March. And then after their briefing on, we're going to ask you to adopt a target. This is a goal that we have talked about previously. It is a required element of that plan. But for now, I'm going to pass it off to Tool Design, and I'll let them walk you through what you'd expect to see in the plan itself.
Gunnar, hi folks, my name is Sean Murphy Lopez. I'm a senior planner with Tool Design, and I'm just going to give you all a quick overview of the plan, or just a reminder. You might have seen this next slide before. These are the different components that we're working on, and we had hoped to have the plan available for you all to review at this month's meeting. We missed our deadline, and that was not an issue with staff, that was an issue with your consultant team. So like Gunnar mentioned, we're making a lot of progress right now, and we anticipate it will be ready at your next meeting. The different components that we're working on, the countermeasure toolbox, which is on the top row, second from the left, as well as the crash data analysis and the implementation plan and program. Those are really the meat of the plan, and that's what we've finished up this week, and we'll be summarizing all of that in easy to read chapters in one comprehensive safety action plan, which is in the lower right-hand corner, and then working up toward the upper right-hand corner, which is that grant application. So on the next slide, this is an outline of what the Federal Highway Administration requires for a comprehensive safety action plan. So these 8 items on the left are basically going to become the chapters of the plan, and that image on the right, this describes what each of those items are and what FHWA requires. So on the next slide, we've just taken those requirements from the Federal Highway Administration and we've translated them into chapters. Everything is almost a one-to-one translation there. We've moved a couple things around, but nothing very significant, and we've combined a couple requirements into chapter 2. The plan is going to have some pretty meaty appendices, and all the appendices are finished. I'm happy to finally say as of yesterday, and we're incorporating comments from staff right now. And Appendix E, which is Member Community Projects and Toolkit, these are going to be probably some of the most interesting parts of the plan for communities that are part of the MPO. And I'm going to hand it off to Dean. He's going to explain those maps.
All right, thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dean Chamberlain. I'm a senior engineer with Tool Design Group, helping out with the development of this plan, especially when it comes to project identification and prioritization. So I want to touch on a few community deliverables that all of your member communities will see through this plan. First thing I wanted to highlight is that each member community will get a map looking like the one that you see on the screen. This is the example from Ankeny, with different project locations identified and a rough prioritization of critical, high, and medium prioritization. These projects and prioritizations are attached also to a companion table. If you go to the next slide, please, that shows each of these projects with kind of a, what street is it on, begin, end point, length, prioritization, scoring. That scoring is based off of a combination of different things, crash history, risk factors for safety, equity considerations, and some other thing. Inclusion in capital improvement program plans at this point, and I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting right this second. But all of those things are going into identification of that prioritization score, and that translates into a tier that, like I said, at critical, high, or medium. And then those show up on the map. We have also tied this to something called a high injury street profile, which essentially allows a visualization of what some of these safety improvements could look like. If you go to the next slide here, this is just an example of one of those high injury street profiles. It gives kind of the context of a typical transportation facility that meets that generalized profile. And it also gives some examples of what we call countermeasures, which are essentially strategies that can be implemented, mostly infrastructure related, to resolve some of those issues that are causing safety problems that are showing up through crash history and other things as we did the analysis and found out. Go to the next slide, please. Like I said, those countermeasures that we've identified in those high injury street profiles also are detailed out in these project tables to give each community kind of a head start, so to speak, on what they might want to consider for implementation when and if there's a project that comes on, these projects that's shown in the map. And so you can see just an example of one, and some countermeasures could be applicable in this circumstance and others may not be. This is just kind of a tool for each community to help kind of start that conversation, and also to provide some more information to elected officials and the members of the community and other stakeholders as to what could be implemented in these areas. If you go to the next slide, please, those countermeasures are also linked to fact sheets, which I don't expect you to read on the screen here, but just know that each of these countermeasures has, kind of a description of what these things are, estimated relative cost, timeline for implementation, different types of applicable locations and street types, the safety benefits, connection to Iowa's SUDAS design guidance, for those of you who aren't familiar. And then expected crash reduction based off of research through FHW and other sources, and then other considerations if the community is interested in pursuing this further. You can also see there are examples of these countermeasures, quote unquote, in the wild out there, and then also kind of a more, we'll say, conceptual drawing of some of these as to what they might look like when implemented as well. Yeah, thank you. So as alluded to earlier, this is kind of the timeline for the plan completion. We have been hard at work to wrap up all of these things. As Sean mentioned, our appendices are in draft form. We've been sprinkling them over to MPO staff and others to review. We will be at the Transportation Technical Committee and Executive Committee on February 6th, and then to the Policy Committee on February 20th. with the plan for review and hopeful approval. And then as I'll get into here in a second, there's a grant application submittal that's on a similar time frame, but a little bit different as well. Yes, so any questions on any of that?
Doesn't appear to be so.
Okay.
Mark, one question. Would this be coming to the bike ped roundtable too?
Yes, and I think it has gone through the bike ped roundtable a little bit. We will bring it back in February at their meeting, which would be that week in between exec and the tech exec and policy meeting.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Dylan. So will we be getting a plan of this before the 20th so we can review it a little bit more detail? And then so if we have questions about the prioritization or input on that, do we just direct that to you or?
Yeah, you can direct that to anyone on our staff, probably me or Gunnar or Marcus would be the one to do that. And we are sending this out to the technical committee. I can't remember the exact date, but we're going to get that out as quickly as possible so your staffs have a chance to review all of this and hopefully talk with you if they have questions of what the priorities are for your communities.
Technical members have been sent the first batch of documents, so they're having the opportunity to review those now. They're going to be seeing subsequent batches here in the next next week and a half. Does really well.
Right, so for the grant application, are these specific projects in communities like Des Moines did applications for, I think, 4 sections that there are a lot of injuries at, and so is that part of what the grant application is about?
Yes, the grant application, we are still trying to determine what those projects are. We have, with the consultant team's help, we're going through and analyzing what the high crash areas are and what projects make sense. It'll probably be a combination of similar to what City Des Moines did, where you have a couple key corridors, but then you have a lot of citywide, or in our case, region-wide applications or treatments, if you will. So we're still trying to figure that out. We'll be working with the communities more one-on-one to make sure that if we have identified that corridor, that they're actually ready to do it, that it fits what they want to do, rather than us telling them that's what they have to do, right? We want to make sure there's a partnership. And that'll happen concurrent, but after the plan is approved as well.
And we have the universe of available places and options for treatment. Plan, the grant application will be pretty tight, focus on a few things.
So would a community have to have a plan already in the works for a particular intersection to qualify?
Not necessarily. If they do have that, that's something we want to figure out because they might be further along and ready to go. At the same time, if they're already ready to go and letting the project, we don't want to put it in here because then that wouldn't make sense. So those are the types of conversations we're having now with the communities.
Additional questions?
I'm going to jump to the voting action portion of this agenda item and remind everyone that a part of this plan is adopting a Vision Zero statement for the plan itself. It is a requirement of that plan, and we have to have that plan in order to qualify for implementation dollars. So we've had this discussion previously at both the tech, exec, and policy, as well as the safety committee. And the consensus was a target goal of eliminating fatal and serious injury crashes by target year 2045. This is the path to zero. Most of you would have had the opportunity to see this at a previous meeting. The thought behind the 2045 timeline is that it's roughly 5 percentage points per year. This shows a straight line decline. It's more likely to be our curve as we implement things, but this is how it, this is some of the logic behind that target year. So a draft resolution was included in your packet. If you have a chance to take a look at that, it effectively communicates what we're summarizing here of that target goal. So staff recommends approval of this. Our hope is to have any discussion about this here and now so that next month we can focus on adoption of the plan itself.
Question? Thoughts? Ready? You're none.
Pleasant Hill, so move.
Second. By Pleasant Hill, second by Des Moines. Any continued discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Our goals are approved. Thank you. Up next, we have a report and vote on the multimodal economic impact study. Dylan.
Thank you. With the development of the current work program, we brought this project forward to you, and it is included in the work program and budget, but we promised that we would come back and talk to you when it's actually time to do this. So we had this idea for a multimodal economic impact study. And this is partially to better understand what the economic impact is of transportation investments in general. And it also would assist DART as they're going to their Reimagine DART effort to understand the impacts of transit specifically. This is a best practice that we've identified, and in particular, Salt Lake City region has been doing this for a number of years. In that region, every 5 years, or maybe it's every 4 years, as they do their long-range transportation plan, their MPO, their transit system, as well as the DOT, goes in together and does a big analysis like this. We have had some conversations. We've had a lot of conversations with DART about this. We've also spoken with the systems planning at the DOT a little bit as well, and they seem interested to do this. So the study objectives, like I said, would look at all of transportation and then do a little deeper dive into public transportation. If you go to the next slide, the estimate that we are assuming after talking to a few consultants would be in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. In our current budget, like I said, we have $150,000 set aside for this. DART has indicated that they would contribute to the plan as well. DOT is still to be determined, but we're talking to them. As far as timing, if we are a go, if you give us the approval today to issue an RFP, we would probably get that RFP out tomorrow. We have that ready to go with the idea that by February's meeting, we would have responses, have a consultant picked, and have a contract ready to go for approval. That's a pretty quick turnaround, but we want to make sure that we're doing this now so that it aligns, like I said, with that Reimagine DART project. The actual work for the firm would last from March to August, September timeframe. Rough goal was to have September be the time when the final results would come back to the board for approval or receive and file, whatever we're going to do with it. Can't remember if there's another slide there. No. So that's what we have for you. Very happy to take any questions, comments, talk through this a little bit.
How is this information going to be used?
So this information would help us. Basically, what they would look at is what's going into the transportation, what transportation dollars are going into the economy, and better able to tell us this is just how much this affects jobs and the job creation, wages, all that kind of economic impact that goes into it. It could also help tell us what types of projects are more economically effective than others. So if we're doing a roadway project on these types of facilities versus these types of facilities, it wouldn't get down into a project by project
I was just gonna say, so.
breakdown, but holistically.
And then how does that factor into prioritization of funding projects?
As we get going with, if this becomes a recurring thing, ideally we would get to a point where our long range plan or even our SDBG funds, we look at them as packages. So we can either do this set of projects or this set of projects. And so do scenarios and better able to understand economic impact of those scenarios. Obviously, we just did our long range plan. So this would help set a baseline for what that investment looks like that we just approved in our plan. But it could look at just basically understanding what the role of transportation is into our economy. Better to help us make requests for funding, both legislative, federal, state legislature, help make a pitch to citizens as you do regional transportation or do transportation projects in your communities to just help paint that picture of, we can tell them what safety is, we can tell what congestion relief is going to be. That economic indicator is a much more difficult one. I think we all know, but this would help put some actual meat on the bone of what that is. And then for transit's perspective, there's a lot more specifics just because they're going through that right now where they can look at multiple scenarios.
And your vision would be then to redo this every 5 years, so you coming back every 4 to 5 years asking for funding for this?
That would be, yeah, if we like what we do, obviously, yeah.
Andrew Sanders.
I appreciate if that analysis also took into account retention of economic activity. Because so many of our projects are replacing existing roadway that may have zero new growth, but it's helping to retain possibly thousands of jobs. I think a second avenue.
Yeah, and
example.
And like I said, there's scenarios. One of the scenarios is what if we didn't put any investment into the system? And this would help tell us economically, this is what, it's not a good picture, obviously, but this is put some actual numbers to it. And at least the company we've been talking with, and like I said, we're going to do an RFP. But the example from Salt Lake City that they've done is they can look and say, here's what it does to actual sectors. So all the medical facility stuff out in McLeod and West Des Moines, this is how the transportation system is helping those facilities run because it gets workers there. It helps do this many more surgeries. You know, they can break it down pretty specifically in terms of industry sectors if we choose to have that part of that analysis. So it's pretty robust.
So it's safe to assume the potential renaming of 435 Wilbur could be a part of this.
It could be, yes. We have talked about that with one of the firms that we've, you know, that did the Salt Lake City. That might be something we have to carve out a little bit more specifically because it's just a little different animal, but yes, that is on the table.
Yeah, what it says here, DART also plans to contribute to the study. Do we know how much DART is going to contribute to the?
I can answer that.
Sure.
Specifically, we don't have the exact amount. Some of this will depend on the RFP. We do have some grant funds though, so we do plan to use grant funds to pay for it. And then we have had conversations with our executive committee, and it will depend, you know, which tasks they choose to look at, how quickly we get responses. For example, the next phase of Reimagine DART is to bring out 2 different concepts to get feedback from the community on some choices on how we approach transit. If we had it in time to run an ROI and compare the return on investment between each of those plans, we would love to do that. So it'll really depend on what the RFP and the numbers come in at. But we have grant funds up to about 100,000 that we could allocate to this if the commission decides to.
Any other questions?
Does a study like this look at like Des Moines specifically? So your hospital, you know, example, are they looking at our hospitals specifically and how that does it? Or are they just kind of plugging in, put a hospital on this road and it does this?
No, it would be specific to our region. They can take information from our travel demand model, which is something we have, and they can marry that with localized economic data as well, so that we know if we do something that improves congestion, for example, that's going to correlate to this much travel savings because you can get to work easier or create this many more jobs, that sort of stuff. So it is specific to our need.
It'd be helpful to have actual numbers instead of we think. If we can get some data ongoing instead of this, well, we don't get this, but we have this, and there's no concrete information really, other than we know it's essential, but how essential is it?
Assuming this is approved, would we be able to, is that the work they did in Salt Lake City? And I understand it's an RFP, and it could be somebody else, but would we be able to see what they did?
Yes, and that's something we actually had a call with them earlier today and said, can we see some of this information? And some of that is they're still going through their work in Salt Lake City, so it's not quite ready, but they're hoping here soon. And we've had conversations with Salt Lake directly, and that might be an approach we can get them to share some of their work products with us.
You need a motion? Well, I just want to clarify too that, yeah, we will, but the motion is only to authorize the issuance of the RFP. So next month, right, results and all that, we can discuss the validity or the feasibility of it. So yes, move approval. Second. By Des Moines, second by West Des Moines. Any further discussion? None? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Up next, we have a report on the fiscal year 2026 Unified Planning Work Program and Strategic Plan. We do have a guest here, but turn over to Dylan first.
Thank you. So this time of year, we start to work on our work program and budget. And the work program is called the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. It's a federally required document that essentially says, because we receive federal funds, this is what we're going to do with those funds to justify their use. There's certain things that we have to do that we have to, there's certain work products we have to do. There's certain elements that we have to include in that work program. The draft of that is due April 1st. So at next month's meeting, we'll have probably a rough budget for you to look at. Policy committee doesn't meet in March, so the executive committee will take that up. But then in April and so forth, we'll send all this out, the draft to via email. At the May meeting is when we will approve the final document for the work program. This year, what we want to do is put a new wrinkle into it, which is put more strategic planning into the work program. This seems like the nice vehicle that it outlines what we're going to do for the year. Let's have some thoughts of what are we strategically going to be doing this year. And to do that work, if you go to the next slide, I'll skip this for a moment. You can go on to the next slide. We have a couple of things going on here. One is for the work program, we like to request communities to give us any ideas that they have. So any plans, studies, research you want to do, that sort of thing. That'd be good to know. We've asked this probably more of the technical committee, but if you're aware of anything, please let us know. And then because of the strategic plan element, there's a SWOT analysis that we're asking you to do as well. For the strategic plan element, if you go to the next slide, we have a steering committee that has been assembled, and they actually met for the first time prior to this meeting. You can see the representatives on that committee up on the screen. We also have Cass Falls to the top, who's, if you're familiar, done some work with us over the last year. She is leading this strategic plan component as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Cass. She can walk through more of the strategic plan aspects of this, and then we can take any questions on the whole.
It is good to see everybody again today. Happy 2025. I just had a few things that I wanted to share with you about the development of the strategic framework and our visioning process. Because as Dylan mentioned, we have a very fast timeline that we are going to be working through in order to meet the federal planning requirements as well. Okay, but I think too fast. So over the next few months, there's actually two primary objectives with the scopes of work that we are going to be navigating, which is creating, developing, updating the strategic framework for the MPO, which just as a reminder for everyone, the last time the MPO went through a strategic planning process was in 2017. So that plan actually expired in 2022. So we've been navigating for a little bit of time without a strategic plan. But we'll come back to that. And then we learned through our governance insights process that we also wanted to spend some time updating mission, vision, and values. So we're putting these two processes as an effort to overlap so we can benefit from all of the research that we've done today, the work we've done today, and accomplish two things at the same time, if that sounds like a good plan to everybody else. Good plan. All right. So to clarify what we will be doing in our strategic approach, we are going to develop a hybrid strategic framework through this process. We are not going to do a full-blown strategic planning process. So in the framework, what you will see when it comes back to you in February is it will actually consolidate strategic visioning and tactical efforts together. The intention of the strategic framework is that it will have a 1-year lifespan to get you through this year so that you can take on strategic planning in a future year. Our intention with that is we have done a lot of work in planning over the last year with governance insights, with human capital planning. We didn't want to do a heavy process at this time because we appreciate the work that the MPO Policy Committee has done. So we have a lot of work that we can leverage, a lot of research that we can leverage to build a framework to use in 2025. And then you can look at a full strategic planning process in the future. So as we move through this process, we aren't going to do external interviews and external meetings. We're going to focus on the research we have today and the input we can gather from the technical committee and the policy committee to deliver the framework in February. Any questions on that? It moved. So as Dylan mentioned, we'll be sharing a SWOT worksheet. Has that gone out yet? Just to the technical committee?
No, it was in the agenda.
It was in the, okay. So we'll take a closer look at that here in a moment. I can't express to you the importance of having your communities complete that SWOT worksheet. As we go through the SWOT worksheet here in a second, I'll come back to that. The key thing is that worksheet is due January 31st. I don't have a preference if each member here at the table submits a worksheet or if you submit one per community or one per member. The key thing is I just need your feedback, Your feedback is critical to this process. And then what we will do is we will balance those SWOT worksheets against the draft of the strategic framework. As a leadership team and with the strategic planning committee that Dylan outlined today, we have already been working on drafting the strategic framework based on what we already know through the research captured through the governance insights work and the human capital planning. Our goal is to be able to present that framework to the committee in its updated form in mid-February. We did set a date. We're meeting on Valentine's Day. We love strategy. Strategy loves the committee. And then we will present that framework to the full policy committee on February 20th. So again, we're moving very quickly through this process. To talk about dates for one moment, if we don't hit our February 20th timeline, our challenge is there's no meeting in March. So that gets us to a point where we'd be presenting a framework to you in April, and then that just feels like the year is already half over. So we're trying to be very intentional about getting the framework developed and finalized in February. So it's active and usable for the full year. And we don't have a concern at this point that we'll be able to meet that deadline as long as you do your homework. Okay. I'm contingent on you. So vision, mission, and values. We do have a little bit more breathing room, although we'll be leveraging information from the SWOT analysis to help us build a draft update to vision, mission, and values. With the SWOT analysis, if you've been through strategic planning before, SWOT represents strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, things that impact you from an internal influence standpoint and an external influence standpoint as an operation. But also with analysis, there's an exercise called a SOAR, which is strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. The worksheet that I put together for you focuses also on thinking about aspirations and results, which helps us shape vision. So with that worksheet, I'm helping you think about organization, operation, but also vision and mission. So we're putting the two together. In February, after we get all of those results, we will do a brief exercise as part of the policy committee meeting to kind of clarify what we learned from the aspirations results conversation. 10 to 15 minutes of active policy committee engagement, just so we can make sure we're all aligned as we're drafting the vision and mission. But our goal is to bring that information back to you back in April. So we'll have those drafts for your consideration in April. The strategy subcommittee will also be reviewing those drafts. So when they come to you, they will have been vetted and have insight from the strategy committee as well. On the SOAR, oh, go ahead.
Yes, when do you need the SWOT analysis form back by?
January 31st. On the SWOT analysis worksheet, and there's multiple ways that we can send it to you as a Word document. You can simply type your thoughts into the boxes. You can print it as a PDF. You can write on it and send it. As long as I can read your writing, I'm happy to work with whatever works with you. The front page of the SWOT analysis are the boxes. The second page has thought prompting questions. So if you feel like I'm going to send you this document and then what do I do with it? You know, I would never do that to you. So on the back page of the SWOT worksheet are things to help you think about the kinds of information we're looking for. What I don't want you to do is just answer the questions on the second page. Those are just to help get you thinking. But 3 to 5 bullet points in each box is all that I need. You don't have to write me a paragraph or a novel, just those initial thoughts. And then we'll bring back to you some pretty great information. So, sound good?
Questions? Sounds great.
Any comments from the strategic planning committee today that met earlier?
Just trying to move it as quick as we can and get it in place. So we appreciate your January 31st attention.
See you in February.
Thank you. We're going to circle back to item number 6, which is a presentation and vote in the fiscal year 2025. And we'll have Dylan start off the conversation.
Thank you. We have our audit for you here for approval today. We've got Joe Sparks from Denman on the line to walk us through this, to release the results of it. I'll turn it over to Joe.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Sparks. I was the manager on this year's audit engagement. You might be familiar with Dave Ellis. He's kind of been the one that has kind of held these presentations in the past, but I'm feeling issues this year to take control of the presentation here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, pull up the PowerPoint, present it out of here.
It's already on there, Joe.
Oh, it's on there? Okay, I'll go ahead and walk through it. So go to slide 2. So this kind of gives us a brief summary of our audit report. We did present the audit to the Executive Committee and Finance Committee back in December. So I'm going to briefly walk through the independent auditor's report, the financial performance for year-end June 30, 2024, our internal control and compliance findings and our single audit results, and also our required communications with those charged with governance. So going on to the independent auditor's report, what you guys want to hear is you had an unmodified clean opinion, and that's what you guys had during this year, which is similar to the prior years. We also, in the audit report, we list out our management responsibilities and auditor responsibilities. I'm not going to go through each one of those, but those are listed out in the report if you want to read through them. Next, I'll briefly just kind of walk through the statement of activities for the year, which will show your revenue and expenses. Overall charges for services, member assessments, and other revenues didn't fluctuate a whole lot. The main change this year was in operating capital grants, primarily due to the changes in the water trails project. And as you can see below in the expenses, the transportation planning line also changed in a similar fashion to the operating capital grants on changes in revenue. This is kind of what you expected since most of those grants are on a reimbursement basis. So as revenues increase, expenses you typically increase consistently with those. So overall, the change in that position was minus 138,594 for the year. Next, I'll go to the results of our reporting on internal control and compliance. So this year we did have a finding related to the major program. Our finding was a financial reporting finding, which is similar to what we had last year. We do consider this to be a material weakness. It was just related to some year-end journal entries for the water trails project that weren't properly recorded at year-end. We did issue a recommendation to correct the finding, and NPO also gave us a response for the finding. And we do accept the response and believe that going forward, if the procedures are put in place, that this finding will be taken off. We did also have a segregation of duties comment last year that we did take off of this year's audit based on the implementation of the employee handbook and accounting procedures manual in the prior year. We did not have any findings related to statutory reporting. Next, I'll briefly go through the required communications. So there's no changes in significant accounting policies. Accounting estimates are part of our financial statements. So we do have a few significant estimates each year, such as useful life on depreciation, the right of use leases, things of that manner. There was a few journal entries that I've provided to Rhonda, and she's got those posted to tie up the trial balance accounting system to our audit. We didn't have any disagreements with management. We didn't consult with any other accountants, and we didn't have any difficulties encountered performing during the audit. So overall, the audit process went pretty well. Rhonda and Dylan do a great job of getting everything ready for us. And I am pretty confident that going forward, we'll hopefully get that financial reporting comment off of there. And like I said, we did take the comment from the prior year off of there this year. So I'll leave it open to the board to see if you guys have any questions or anything's open for discussion.
Questions? I have a comment. For those that haven't been involved with this group over the last 2.5 years, we've made great strides. It should be celebrated. We reconvened the finance subcommittee and really would like to thank those committees that their finance directors participated in that effort. We have complete financial reports. Reports are reviewed and signed. Duties are segregated. Really want to thank staff and Ted for helping get all of that accomplished for us. And to note, we still have material weakness, again, with our federal grant funds that we need to work on. But Dylan and Rhonda already have lined up an accountant who we will convene quarterly or more if we need to make sure that we correct that material weakness. And quite frankly, I'm really hoping next year we have a completely clean audit. So thank everybody for all of their work on those. Appreciate it.
Is there any other questions or comments?
Just maybe a question or more context relative to the year-end water trails recordation or whatever it is that was a material weakness. Is that because you're not getting information from water trails? Is that, can you help expound upon what the issue is there so I can kind of sense what it is?
Yeah, sure. So the issue was there's this June at the year end, you guys have a reimbursement request. So they reimburse requests for June expenses after year end, and that just wasn't booked for June. So like we picked up that revenue comes in like in August, 2 months after the actual expenses were incurred. And so it's just a delay in the timing of when the expense was incurred versus when the reimbursement was posted. And so during our audit, we identified that and posted it back into the fiscal year.
So going forward, what we would do is put that as a accounts receivable in June, so that when we get the money in August, it still counts towards the previous fiscal year. That's what we do with our other grant funds. We just didn't do that with this one.
All right, thank you.
All right. Yep. Questions? Anything else? No, this is an item we vote on.
I'll move to receive the audit.
Second.
Moved by Moines, second by Clive. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Audit is approved. Thank you. Moving on, item 10, we have a report on 2025 committees, representative handbook, and officer nominations. I'll turn this over to Dylan.
Thank you. A couple items all kind of related to each other here, but because this is our first meeting after the beginning of the calendar year, we do have some new representatives. I don't want to try to go around the room and introduce all the new folks, so I've listed them up here. If you're new, you can feel free to raise your hand. We'll give you a nice welcome. But just keep in mind that we do have some new folks, which is a little bit more than usual for a non-city council election, just the way things shook out. We do have not an employee, an MPO representative handbook that all of these representatives are documented in. We will send that out in the post-meeting email so that you can, and it was linked in the agenda packet too. So if you want to see who's on what committees and all that kind of stuff, it is there. That handbook also, while I'm thinking about it, has a list of acronyms. It's got meeting dates. It's got kind of the basic stuff. So I know that's a frequently requested thing. You can find it in there. We will also be holding an orientation at some point, most likely prior to the February MPO meeting. So if you are new, or even if you're not new, feel free to come get a refresher on what's going on with the MPO. If you go to the next slide, we have our executive committee. So the way the executive committee works is there are certain members who are designated members, those communities over 50,000 as well as Polk County. And then we have 3 sub areas who appoint their representatives. So you can see up there who our representatives are for this year's executive committee. We've got the current officers identified. I will note, I think it's on the next slide, there is a nominating committee that has been formed. That nominating committee includes Councilman Gatto, Amanda Wonky, and Mayor O'Connor from Altoona. They've recommended that the current slate continue on for another year. That will come forward again as a voting item next month. Nominations can be made from the floor at that time as well. Once that vote has taken place, new officers, the new terms will begin in March to February. So a little unique just because of timing of everything. Final item on this, we do have a couple other committees that we want to make note of. The funding subcommittee is a fairly prominent one, and there's a lot of turnover this year with that. I'll put up there on the screen who those representatives are for this cycle of funding subcommittee. So a couple new members fit on there, like I mentioned. And then there's other subcommittee opportunities. So we do, Councilman Murray mentioned the finance subcommittee. If anybody's interested in serving on that, we're always welcome to have more. There's a personnel committee that I know a few of you are on that if you want to continue on, great. If you want to step down and have someone else take your spot, that's fine too. We have a number of roundtables, bicycle pedestrian roundtable, freight roundtable, traffic management advisory committee, so on. We don't have a lot of policy committee representation on those committees, quite frankly. It'd be nice to have some folks on there. So if any of those are interest areas to you, if you're a big bicyclist, like freight for some reason, let us know. You can participate in those. And then one thing from our governance exercise that we did back in last year, was to have more project-based committees. So as we go through the strategic plan and the work program, and we identify what the projects are that we'll be working on this next fiscal year, we'll probably be developing project-based committees too, and that'll be an opportunity to get further involvement. If you have any questions, if you're interested in any of these or want further follow-up, please reach out and let me know, and be happy to have you serve on it.
Any questions? And we'll move on to report and future 435 update. Gunner.
A brief update on long-term plan for the Des Moines area MPO. This is part of a long-term effort to achieve interstate designation for what we're calling Future 435 or the Purple Heart Highway, as shown on the screen here. The briefest of recaps, the Iowa DOT completed a outreach effort in 2022 and put forward an action plan with 4 key components to it. First one being an exemption of the state legislature related to speed, a federal weight exemption of Congress related to weight, and then the final steps of the technical analysis and a designation application. The first 2 steps there are really about preserving the use of the corridor by existing users, namely in the ag sector, specifically slow-moving farm equipment, as well as heavy trucks moving basically soybeans on that corridor currently. Since that time, we've spent a lot of time working with local stakeholders. I'm not going to belabor this point here, but we spent a lot of time trying to cultivate relationships with our ag stakeholders. And one thing that we encountered was a policy at the Farm Bureau saying that they would oppose any conversion of a 4-lane divided highway to an interstate unless an alternative was provided. That felt like a real big barrier. It turned into an opportunity, and we went to them and said, well, would you like a meaningful exploration of alternatives? And the answer was yes. And so in addition to the 4-part plan outlined by the DOT, we've also undertaken a few other initiatives. One is how can we preserve the corridor now to make it as safe as possible for existing users there now? And then also looking long-term, can we perform an alternatives analysis to see what possible routes could be an option going forward? So the real focus is on the state legislature right now. That's where all the attention is. Last year, there was a bill. It was introduced by Representative Losey, passed out of a couple of committees. It would have done 2 things. First, it would have provided that minimum speed exemption. Secondly, it would have appropriated $250,000 toward an alternatives analysis. Passed out of House Commerce and Appropriations Committee. It did not make it to, it was intent to go to the standings bill. It did not make it there. That bill is coming back this year. It will also provide minimum speed exemption as well as the appropriation for an alternatives analysis. Won't go into too much depth here, but the bill being introduced this year is going to incorporate feedback received last year from ag stakeholders. If we're fortunate enough to have legislation passed this year, the next step would be to start working with our congressional delegation on a federal weight exemption. We're targeting the next surface transportation reauthorization bill as the preferred vehicle for that. We've been working closely with Senator Grassley's office. And if we're successful at the state level, the next step would be to submit language to our congressional offices so that they can have it submitted in the early drafts of that reauthorization bill. We want to start you thinking on subsequent next steps in terms of what components are going to need funding. Again, there's a lot of ifs on here, but if we're successful at the state level, we want you to start thinking about the alternatives analysis funding with funding for a technical analysis, and then looking further down the road, if we get to that interstate designation, we're going to have expenses related to updating signage. So I won't go through each of these for you, but just to put it on your radar as we're talking about UPWP and budgets in the next coming months, this is something that we need to be thinking about. The last thing I'll mention is that last week we held a meeting with corridor communities to strategize on this legislative session. We had good showings from our corridor communities. Almost everyone was represented there. We had a few elected officials in the room, Mayor Bozen, Councilmember Murray. And the real strategy to come out of that is to focus on the Senate side and really identify and cultivate supporters and champions. And that work is well underway. I'd open it up to Mayor Bozen or Councilmember Murray if you had any comments from that session last week.
It's critical to get it done. And how long has it been going?
It's been going for quite some time.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get through the threshold. I mean, it sounds like the Senate was a hang up, so it's just to put all efforts on everyone that is impacted. So if you know any legislators. Right.
Is there a identified champion in the Senate that'd be willing to file something?
Yeah.
We learned from Representative Losi that Senator Uslo will be running the bill and introducing a companion bill this year. We also have a meeting set up with Senator Sinclair in early February to start cultivating those relationships. I know Mayor Holm's been talking to, it's an old habit, I'm sorry. Supervisor Holm has been, working some of his contacts as well. I don't think there's, the more friends in the Senate, the better. So if you have contacts that you would like us to meet with, we would welcome the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for the update.
Excuse me if I may, sorry. Steve Richardson from Indianola, City of Indianola. Back on the corridor, the interstate corridor there, one of the questions, I believe, or one of the opportunities that you were mentioning was alternative routes for farm equipment. I don't know if it's still an option or not, but and the question would be whether or not it's still a federal policy, but the highway bridge at the old highway, I think it was 46 that went across the Iowa Power Plant there, was taken out because the new roadway bridge over the river at that point was too close, according to federal policy. And that's why that was taken out. That used to be the route that most of the farmers would take to stay off of any kind of major highways. And I don't know if that's something that anybody remembers or not, but I was instrumentally involved with this whole thing with Congressman Boswell when it went through in the 1990s. And so, and I was in the state legislature at that time. So I don't know if that's still an option. Maybe look at putting a bridge back in there that's wide enough for the traffic if the roads are still good. I obviously haven't been down that way for a long time because you can't go through there. But that was at one time the corridor that most of the farmers in the Carlisle area, Avon Lake area used to get across their fields on the other side of the river. So just an FYI, a little bit of history and background on that. So just want to throw that out there.
Thank you very much for the question. The very short answer is no. We've looked at that a little bit, and I think the consensus opinion is that it is too far inside the urbanized area to be useful to the agricultural community at this time. I think they're thinking long-term, they want to be farther out more into a rural area. There's more to the answer to that, but that's the short version.
Thank you. That's a good point, but I just want to bring historical context to that. So
thank you for that. All right, moving on to our informational items. These were materials presented in your packet, and if anyone has any questions, we can discuss them. Otherwise, they were contained in the district packet for review. No questions, move on to director's report. Dylan.
Thank you. A couple items for your attention here in announcements, I suppose. Updates on the line board. So I mentioned we're doing an orientation that'll be probably, like, it's not set in stone, but probably before the meeting next month. I'm still doing one-on-one meetings with folks. So if any of the new members, any existing members want to sit down and chat, get caught up on the MPO and so forth, I'm always scheduling those and willing to do that. And I mentioned the committee opportunities earlier. If we move on to strategic direction, we talked about the strategic plan. One thing to put on your radar is that in early April, we will have our quadrennial every 4 years certification review with the USDOT. So that's a time they come and poke and prod and make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do. So that'll be an interesting time for us. That final bullet there is something that we're still trying to learn more information on. But if you weren't aware, a couple of days ago, President Trump issued an executive order that effectively freezes all funds related to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the Transportation Authorization Bill, in which all MPO funding comes from, both operations, construction, infrastructure funds, and so forth. They did issue a clarification that said it was more targeted. The intent was more targeted towards the Green New Deal related aspects of it. So electric vehicles, carbon reduction, and so forth. We're still working to figure out more. I know USDOT, Iowa DOT, AMPO, the Association of MPOs, all working on what this actually means for us. So we'll keep you abreast of what happens. I think it's probably safe to say, I shouldn't say this, it's possible that the carbon reduction funds that we received, that we worked hard to figure out where those are going, might not be there anymore. That was probably one of the things that's going to come off the table. So that's something to just put on your radar. We might have to figure out what we do with those projects. So we'll keep you abreast of what's going on there. If you go to the next item, in terms of updating staff, a big announcement here is we have Marcus Kanan with us. So Marcus, you want to stand up, wait, or whatever. Marcus, for those. I didn't expect the ovation.
Slow clap.
Marcus was a previous employee of the MPO about 5 years ago, and Z left us. Z actually replaced Marcus's position that Marcus left the first time. So now kind of full circle, he's back with us. So that's great. We'll be able to keep everything chugging along because he's familiar with the region, familiar with the organization, and it's great to have her back. If you go back one slide, one thing I don't want to gloss over too much selfishly, I will have a annual review coming up, and I turn it over to the chair to explain that a little bit.
Sure. Again, last year we've kind of been searching for a memorialized process. So this year we didn't quite get to that. I'm going to ask the executive officers to perform a review. We're going to work with Dylan's executive council task to come up with a tool. And we'll perform that, but moving forward, we're going to try to lay out a timeline and be a little more inclusive with the review. The important thing is having a tool that can be tweaked, but at least the tool is stable for the evaluation. So Dylan knows his evaluation, what he'll be based off of each year, rather than each year moving football. So I believe there's a requirement to have it done by the 1st of March. So that's kind of where we're at, but we will get something out to everyone once we have a plan moving forward, but we'll perform this evaluation unless there's a drastic objection to it, to having the executive officers perform that review this year. Any objections to proceeding that way? Next year, we will have a defined process that has goals and timelines laid out, or at least that's my desire.
You want a motion to support that?
Nice change.
No, I don't think we can, as long as no one objects.
I will point out that last time we met in November, I walked through you all participated in the 360 review leadership audit I had. So you had an opportunity to participate in that. We discussed that at the very end of the meeting. So if people weren't around or want to know more about that, please let me know. I'm happy to share any of that information with you too, as we go through this.
Okay. No objections, we'll move forward. And that is all for Dylan's report. We have other action items of interest to the committee. Have an update on the SCBG TAP applications.
It is grant season at the MPO, and I want to provide you a real brief synopsis of the applications received this year. There were quite a few that came in, totaling $46 million in requests. We don't have targets from the Iowa DOT yet. We should have those late February. Last year's allocation was around 17 million. So we can anticipate there's gonna be a significant gap between asks and available funds. We have scheduled the funding subcommittee for a pair of meetings in March. The 12th will be STBG presentations. On March 25th, we'll do TAP presentations followed by deliberations on grant awards. This has not been communicated to TTC members as yet, but they will be shortly. Just a real brief summary. Here is a list of all the project applications through the standard STBG program. Pause real briefly. If you've seen something missing, you can talk to me about it. And then we had a handful of applications come through the planning program as well as for the bridge program, all listed up there for your quick review. And then lastly, 8 projects through the TAP program. You'll be hearing more about this in the coming weeks and months, but just want to give you a very brief overview of the application received. I want to mention real quick too, I meant to do this in my report. We did apply for a couple of grants over the last several months. It took a long time to hear back from. One was for an active transportation plan through the US DOT's Active Transportation Infrastructure and Investment Program. The other one was for a package of electric vehicle charging stations through the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program. We found out, I think on the same day, or at least in the same couple of days, that we did not receive either one of those. So I would say that we would be in contact with DOT to find out what the issues were, but with the change in administration, I don't know how easy that's going to be. And some of those programs are going to go away anyway, most likely.
But we'll see what we can find out on that. And if there's a next round, we'll see how we can improve next time.
All right. Anyone having interest of the committee to add to discussion today?
Just a question, Bill. You talked a little bit about the new administration. I know it's fairly new, but there's been a lot of executive orders. So have we looked and made sure that all of our policies and that we're under the guidelines of how we're giving out money? Are you
There's
on top of that, or?
we are monitoring what's coming through. Yeah, we haven't gone through our policies per se, but we haven't seen anything directly that I guess would make us worried that we're not doing that.
Okay.
We don't have, for example, a dedicated green energy type of thing that would probably be in conflict with what they're looking at. If we do find out something though, we will definitely bring that up.
Even with our scoring for some of the projects?
Right. Yeah, we haven't looked at that. And I don't know that that would be an objection from what they're saying. It's new programs that they had produced that they're just yanking the whole funding. I think for SDBG funds, we still have a lot of leeway on how we want to allocate those dollars.
Sounds good.
If we find out different though, we'll definitely let you know and change.
Okay. Scott, yeah.
Well, the AP specifically used the term environmental justice. So that would be the one I was most concerned with.
Right.
Have you looked into that?
We have, we do have that in our policy.
Yeah, I know. We
In our
made sure
guidelines.
that
If we
language was.
Find out we have to pull that, we can do that, but until we find out otherwise, it's one element of the 5 points of a 100-point scale.
Right. Who will tell you if you have to pull that?
USDOT would tell us.
Okay.
It's kind of like when they develop the rules, it takes a while for the rules to come down.
Okay.
And guess I'm going the other way, it would be the same.
Good to know.
Anything else?
Thank you.
If not, our next meeting is at 4 p.m. on February 20th, 2025. Thank you everyone for your time today.